welcome to the program. The Council of Europe has announced extended sanctions against Russia for a further 6 months, lasting until March 2019. The sanctions have been put in place since the annexation of Crimea in 2014. So what impact did they have so far? To talk more about the Western sanction policy towards Russian Federation, we're joined in the studio today by Julia Osmolovska, Executive Director at the Institute of Negotiations. Hello, and thank you for joining us.
Hello.
So we're going to go to the Europe sanctions a bit later, but first, sanctions in general seems to rile up Russia more and more every time. How to reconcile dialogue and sanctions? How to be firm in the meantime, so keeping the pressure in the meantime, being open to dialogue in that case?
Well, the pressure should be unsustainable first for Russia in order for them to be forced for a more compromised position and readiness to have proper dialogue with the West. So far, I highly doubt that sanctions as such is an efficient instrument which may force Russia to change its position at the moment. But in the mid-term run, it could change Russia's behavior, but how long Ukraine can afford itself to wait, because every day we have sufferings and victims of this war in eastern parts of our country. So this is a question. And then another example, Iran and sanctions. So it's been living under sanctions regime for up to more than decades, and it didn't force Iran to change its position. So therefore, as a sole instrument to force Russia to change its behavior, it's probably not the best option for the time being. On the other hand, Russians, they got used to live under sanctions regime, and therefore they're not very inclined to enter into proper dialogue. And even more, we can see that more reasons are emerging to impose sanctions over Russia. I mean, not only the activity in Syria, the activity in Ukraine, the activity in UK, in Salisbury, and some cyber attacks, accusations, and elections in US. So there are plenty of reasons, and therefore, Western countries would incline to continue with sanctions using different reasons for Russia to change its behavior. But on the other hand, there is a very tricky story about that, because if you have plenty of reasons why you impose sanctions on Russia and putting into one package, like United States are going to do with the new set of legislation. And they say that if Russia changes its behavior, so they can make less burden of these sanctions over Russia. But Russia, they have pick a cherry, a wider option, a menu a la carte to select where to go, which would be the easiest way for her to prove
that. So they can put down one of the things, and every sanctions would go down, basically.
Yes, that's the point. Therefore, probably not mixing all of the reasons for sanctions into one package would be the best way to handle with this type of instrument of enforcement.
So how do you said it wasn't efficient enough? How to make these more efficient?
Well, the position of the Western countries at the moment is to extend it to wider sectors of Russia's economy, and to introduce more technologies-linked sanctions, not just certain restrictions on persons or some companies, whatever. But again, as I said, this could be probably Russia would experience its impact in the mid-term period, not in the short run. But Ukraine, we would like to have some sort of immediate responses, a very effective mechanism which could change the status quo from tomorrow or even from today, but not in the period of 3, 5, 7 years.
So as you said, and obviously Ukraine doesn't necessarily have this time, also because, and I'm thinking about the EU sanctions here, kind of because of its neighbors, because, well, Ukraine has to keep certain links with Hungary, with Poland at the very least, and which are both of the countries which are under scrutiny, not to say the least, by Europe right now. How to reconcile bilateral relations while trying to integrate and keeping those sanctions?
Yes, what I would like to say with regard to these extensions of these sanctions, which just happened a couple of days ago, so unlike the period of 2 years' time ago, these would be for Ukrainian diplomacy much more easier to talk to Europeans, asking for solidarity and coherence in having these sanctions in place, because behavior of Russia
touch everybody.
Yes, and it hasn't changed, and even in some aspects it's become worse. So therefore, I haven't seen a lot of effort, and there were not needed one in order to talk Europeans into a new wave of sanctions. The only problem is that Ukrainians would like to have some more severe sanctions in place, and for example, for Russia's actions in Azov area and Black Sea.
Which is happening now.
Yes, so let's wait and see how this will develop. But so far, I don't see any big likeness of Europeans to go ahead with further strengthening, severing of these sanctions for Russia. For instance, the case with Salisbury. The Minister for Foreign Affairs of UK, when he was presented the evidence, the next wave of evidence to his European colleagues, he was hoping that Europeans would support Britain to impose more sanctions on Russia over Salisbury case, but haven't seen any move so far. Therefore, I would foresee that in terms of more severe sanctions imposed on Russia, this would be very difficult to get unanimity of EU member states.
And there's another difficulty, which is Nord Stream and Germany's interest into Nord Stream, which don't really help Germany to push more sanctions over Russia. How to deal with that?
Well, the whole picture is very much complicated, and I'm pretty sure that it's very difficult to try to force Russia to change its behavior. I think we've talked already about this some time ago with you as well, that we should think about some creative strategies, how to make Russia get interested into dialogue and started to behave seriously. So far, I haven't seen any signs of Russia trying to have a different approach to the problem. So this is our challenge at the moment.
So you'd see Russia continuing his hostile behavior and kind of testing the West and
well,
the
it
EU.
does. It does. For example, take the military exercise, which is happening right now. Yes, the East 2011. So this is also sort of like playing muscles or stretching muscles in front of the West, trying to hint that Russia is growing in terms of military power. And so I haven't seen any signs of Russia trying to think what might be a different strategy to deal with the West.
Now, in 2019, there's going to be an election year in Ukraine. It's kind of an important test for democracy and for the rest of the country. How to ensure that the next government, whatever the changes, whatever the outcome of this election is, continue to make these efforts towards Russia.
A lot of politicians and experts and Russians themselves confess that they wait for elections to happen in Ukraine in order to see which strategy to apply next in their contacts with Ukrainian leadership. But what if the government remains in power? What if the president is re-elected? So they have to deal with the same person. But we will waste another 6 months of time. For Ukraine, it's very unbearable burden, and we need to think about the strategies which we would like to invent today. However, as I said, a lot of skepticism arises, even from American partners. Recently, Kurt Volker mentioned as well that they're not going to change anything before the elections in Ukraine. So this is a very worrisome situation for Ukrainians. But as I said, a number of options are still open for Ukraine. There could be a new president, there could be the same president, but we still have to deal with Russia as it is right now.
Well, thank you very much for this overview. It was a pleasure to have you in the studio today.
Thank you very much.
That was Julia Osmolovska, Executive Director at the Institute of Negotiation. Thank you for watching the program and stay tuned for the rest.